Okay, tonight we're going to pick up again on the verses of chapter 10. Bodhisattva's asked for clarification. And I'm looking at page 10 and 11. Maybe just do the intro here, the jewel leader, and then the first verse in Chinese and English. Shi Bao Shou Pu Sa Ying Song Da Yue Sui Qi Su Ying Ye Wu Shi Gu Bao Sheng Zhou Che Wu Su You Ju Fu Zhi Su Shu. So, Jewel Leader Bodhisattva is responding to Manjushri's questions. These are questions that everybody has. It's not just that the Bodhisattvas have them at this point, but they're really trying to get into what causes all the variations among living beings in the 6 paths, but here particularly, probably mostly focusing on the path of humans. But we should know that this is also talking about the other 5 paths, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly, happiness, suffering, rich and poor, all these contrasting seemingly inequities or injustices. The uneven distribution of privilege, power, prestige, and suffering, disease, and illness. Everybody at some point or another undergoes some, or all, or in different degrees. And so the Bodhisattva is asking for clarification, probably to understand the deep dynamics of what's going on here, but also to be able to do what they're in training to do, which is to be basically Dharma doctors, to go out and work in the field of human suffering. So, just to kind of lead into tonight's section, we've had 2 previous verses of 10 each, and those earlier verses establish the first one, the emptiness of dharmas, the emptiness of phenomena. And then the second level of verses went into the emptiness of self. And just quote some lines here. You won't be able, unless you're a quick reader, be able to spot them as I cite them. But going over the first 20 verses, this phrase, realize all dharmas, all phenomena, are empty illusions. The eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the thinking mind, the sensory organs all are empty and without a nature. So this is establishing that emptiness of phenomena and leading into the emptiness of our notion of a self as a permanent, unchanging, substantial entity. Then the text goes on and says, this is how things are. This is the emptiness of dharmas, emptiness of self. The wise ones, and here we have, could be Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, sages. The wise ones are able to observe the impermanence of all that exists. In fact, to say something exists is to also say it is impermanent, because nothing that we experience exists apart from change. So we call it impermanence, but really we should just say that's how it is. To put the tag of impermanence on top is really sort of our problem and not the description of reality. So the wise ones are able to observe that all that exists is impermanent, that all dharmas are empty, devoid of a self, and the text goes on, there is no self to be found. So this is the first 2 verses are establishing this as the ground of thusness or reality, and yet there's a problem arises. And what's the problem? The text goes on and says, the false mind, or the mind used falsely, discerns them as existent, So the false mind turns it around and says that which is impermanent is permanent. That which is dukkha or suffering is not suffering. That which is not self we call self, and so forth. And so the false mind discerns of existing. The force of conditions and that which pursues them brings myriad phenomena into being. And so now the text is describing the activity of the mind kind of muddled, upside down, driven by anxiety and desire, then brings these phenomena into being. What phenomena? These dreams, illusions, bubble, shadows, conjures them up in the midst of things and says these are real. The text says ephemeral. They soon vanish. So even though we conjure them up and we establish them, and this could be everything from the material basis of our lives, our houses, our cars, what else would go in there? Our jewelry, our refrigerator and everything that's in it, our cars, our retirement homes, our retirement plans, our IPOs. Ephemeral, they soon vanish. As does the one who's setting these up. So there's a kind of tension here. It's not just all things are ephemeral and vanish. We too are ephemeral and vanish. Sorry, guys. I mean, I hate to be a downer tonight, but that's how it is. Day by day, month by month, year by year, the inexorable flow of aging, sickness, diminution in the muscles, in the tendons, in the pretty faces, in the hair, in the teeth, what else? Rosy cheeks and ruby lips, as Shakespeare said, they all come and go. Can't keep them. And a lot of makeup, and it reminds me, I just saw this really gross thing of somebody having, what is that, the stuff they inject to make you look? Botox. What is it called? Botox. I saw a video of someone doing that. I'm like, gosh, don't show that to children. I mean, they're injecting this needle into people's lips and faces and squirting it in, and there's blood, it's like, okay. And yet, when I behold by time's fell hand to face the rich proud cost about hoar and buried age, everything goes away. So even the Botox, so like a dream says the text, none of it is true or real without pausing for an instant. However, this continues in thought after thought. So now you're getting the dynamic of the confusion is not just one thought. It's actually a habituated pattern. And so what we take to be the normalcy of our thoughts and the way we construct or the way we see reality, which is a construction, is actually this dream and thought after thought continuing. And it's very hard to break through this. And this is what the text is establishing here. This is the definition of living beings, dreamers, but not dreamers in an idealistic sense of hoping for a better future, but dreamers living in an unreal making world where they are the center, the egocentric center of all things, and not accepting that things will come, things will go, and so this muddled, grasping, malfunctioning state of mind, I don't know how else to describe it, is what they're talking about in thought after thought. Some people actually say this is a really good definition of samsara. So samsara, generally people take to mean the opposite of nirvana. So samsara literally means in Sanskrit going on continuously. And it's generally thought about life to life. One dies and then conditions change and conditions come together and there's rebirth and there's continuous. And so some people say this is the goal, is to end this involuntary, uncontrolled cycle of birth and death. But it could also just mean thought after thought. So samsara could be an existential situation that's going on, thought after thought. It's a kind of just a habituation that never ceases. So and then the text goes on. I'm quoting from the previous verses before I shoot into tonight. The dharmas perceived in this world, the phenomena that we perceive in the world, the text says solely rely on the mind, their host, their creator, which following such notions, grasp at these appearance of things. And then the text says, this is upside downness, and not Rusher true suchness, not as things really are. So this is where we came in the previous two verses, the emptiness of dharmas, the emptiness of self. Living beings generally are muddled and confused, upside down, and then take this for real, hence dukkha, hence suffering. Because there's no way that you can assert the will over this phenomena and make it something that it isn't to begin with. This becomes, again, maybe more apparent as you get older, but maybe not. There's something that resists even acknowledging getting older. It's really a funny kind of thing to see. I call it a midlife crisis that goes on. It starts when you're 12 or 13, and it just keeps going on. When you accumulate a certain amount of wealth, you can actually then live it, but it starts at an early age. Anyhow. So why, if everything is okay in this way things are, or as my teacher would say, everything's okay, no problem. Basically, there's no problem here if you deal with and accept and stay within the reality of things. Your priorities will become clearer, your activities will become more centered, your relationships with other people will take on a kind of meaningfulness and appropriateness, and you won't be so pulled up and down. But why, if there's basically no problem, does this? So Master Hua's commentary at this point, quote, the entire time that living beings spend as living beings is due to their attachment to phenomena or dharmas that they perceive exist. They perceive that they're fixed and settled and they can take hold of them and keep them, starting with themselves and all their possessions. Because if you look at it, and some philosopher basically said, the material things that we surround ourselves with are just extensions of our sense of self. So the houses, the homes, the security, basically are a kind of dreamlike staging that we set up to give us a sense that we will last, everything's permanent and whatnot. And you see the intense psychic collapse that happens when this falls apart. Now, sometimes it's fire that causes it. California, around here, has seen those illusions burn really quickly. It could be water that takes it out. It could be flooding. Just the other day, in my kitchen making peanut butter and jelly toast. So happy, everything's good. My birthday's coming. Whoa, I might get a present. Whoa, and then tsunami. What? Tsunami? Wow, whoa. Like the earth decided to quake up in, some Humboldt County, 7 point whatnot, and all of a sudden comes the alert. I was thinking, the alert's going off all the time, folks. It's just that it comes in at certain times, but if you thought about it, impermanence, no self, the actual vicissitudes of everything, heart attacks, strokes, these are all, but the phone doesn't do a warning thing at that point because you're not important. What? Sorry. So Master Hua says they perceive these things exist, but none of these people can understand that all these dharmas are impermanence without any self-existing nature to them at all. Thus, he says, we speak of suffering, emptiness, impermanence, and no self, but no one is able to fully comprehend this meaning. This is really interesting. It's, see, some people think these are religious texts. They're not. They're not religious texts. They're descriptions of the absolute nature of the way things really are. By making them religious, to some extent, we deify them, we glorify them, but we also distance ourselves from the actual psychological, existential power of them. So if we see these as descriptions of clarity, almost scientific descriptions of the nature of reality rather than religious expositions, we're closer, I think, to what why the Buddha taught. So the Master is saying none of us comprehend the meaning. Therefore, we never realize the fullness of our human potential. So the funny thing is, by grasping and attaching and setting up these constructs, we think we're getting security, but in fact, we're collapsing our consciousness down to a false dimension that can never, ever be satisfied, and that's dukkha. The constant sense, no matter how I try to beat this game, it beats me. So we don't realize our full human potential. We don't get what the text called the clarity, the luminosity, the bliss of an unattached, unbound, liberated existence. Sometimes it's called the free and easy existence, dzai. And there's a wonderful expression I like. This comes from the Platform Sutra, where Huineng, the sixth patriarch, says, when you reach this kind of liberation, you reach this kind of liberation, this kind of clarity and luminosity, he calls it the playful samadhi, the samadhi of playfulness. And samadhi is a state where you are absolutely in touch with things as they are. And you're not excited about it, and you're not depressed about it. You're just thus. You're with things as they really are. You're with the flow of the way things are. And this then is called a settled stability of mind, called samadhi in Sanskrit. Samadhi means a stability of mind in the midst of things, not a stability of mind by pulling away from reality, but actually right in the midst of things, you're completely squared, settled, and happy. And so this is a passage from this text by the sixth patriarch. He says, and he calls this seeing your true nature, seeing your essential nature. So his state is those who see that intrinsic fullness and goodness and wisdom and compassion, that is their birthright, if you want to use that language. Those who see it are seeing their essential nature, and their essential nature is not a self or anything that belongs to the self. It's much bigger than that. And so that's why he says this mind, this is meant for big things. It's not meant for petty ways. Any event, he says those that see their essential nature can set up or not as they choose. They can come and go freely. They're unhindered and spontaneous. Do you remember this funny passage from, I think it's Confucius, who described his passage through life as he deepened his spiritual and emotional understanding. He said, at 15, I kind of started on the way. And he goes through a series of stages. I stood firm, I resolved my doubts. But his last stage at 70, he said, I could do what I spontaneously felt like I was doing and not overstep the bounds of the Tao. It was like, in other words, this thing unhindered and spontaneous, it doesn't mean just doing anything you want. It means everything you want to do is right. And it's not because it's right. You have to think about it. Let's see, should I do it or not do it? Is it good or bad? It's even before that arises, it's so natural. This is what they call wu wei in Chinese, without doing. You do without doing, without thinking, calculating. So they can come and go freely, unhindered and spontaneous. Everything they do and all their words are appropriate, timely, and according to need. So they don't even make mistakes with their mouth. If it's time to speak and they can do something useful, they speak. If it's not, they're quiet. Most of the time, I spend a lot of time speaking when I shouldn't and being quiet when I shouldn't. They don't make that mistake. Whenever, wherever, and however they appear, they never depart from this inherent nature. They are just realizing the spiritual powers of self-mastery, of the free and easy, and the samadhi of playfulness. This is where the line comes from. And this state is called seeing the nature. So what you describe, what you see in here is when we let go of these false projections, the staged existence, the pretense, the fantasies. When we let go, it's not like there's nothing. There's this incredible opening, what the other texts call the flavor of liberation, a deep excitement of freedom and happiness and joy. That's why maybe they use playful. So then Master Hua asked with them, why, if this is the case, do people turn their backs on this awakening and unite with the dust? Why in the face of this? Partly, I would say, you got to get a little bit of taste of this to be able to turn your back on the dust and come back to alignment. That's what retreats are for. If you go on a 3-day, a weekend retreat, or a week-long retreat, or even take a backpacking trip into the deep mountainous areas, sometimes you can get a sense of that original ground again, your homeland of your nature. And getting a glimpse of that, you can turn your back on the dust again and come back to enlightenment. For me, in my early days, it was solo backpacking in wilderness areas, whether it was Wisconsin, where I was a kid, or whatnot, that really allowed me to cut through the social, political, relational dust, career dust, whatever you call it, and get a sense of returning in that way. So nature could bring me back to my nature. But a retreat, when you go on an Amitabha or Guanyin retreat or a meditation retreat, what happens is you get a little flavor of your original nature. You go, oh my gosh, and sometimes tears come as you feel that. There's a melting away of the falseness. Then it's easier to come back. Master Hua's commentary on this point is, we people mistake this illusory state for reality, the dream world for reality. We don't know that it is something ephemeral and cannot be relied upon. And so we become attached to this illusory existence and forget about the fundamental true emptiness. Now, true emptiness here is talking about not void, nothingness, depression. It's talking about nothing in the way. You are literally, they say, unbound, unhindered. That's the language that's used in this Pali. They say the unbinding as an expression for this liberation of nirvana. So it's not described as loss, but it's actually described as nothing in the way, nothing impeding anymore. Most of why we go to therapists, people go to therapists, it's not really it's to get things out of the way. It's to disencumber. It's to let go. I mean, a good therapist would say, why did you pick it up in the first place? Well, we pick it up in the first place not because we're so want to hurt ourselves or we're necessarily dumb, although the sutra would say there is a fundamental dumbness going on here. We pick it up because it thinks it works for us. We enter relationships, we go in careers, we push ourselves into areas of playing and pretending and trying really hard because we're afraid. And because of that anxiety and the sense that we're not complete, that we lack, we go into that and think, if we do this long enough, oh, what do you fake it till you make it? Is that the expression? Sort of, yeah, I've heard that one. But when you fake it, you actually break yourself. You break it. You don't make it. So he says, we don't enjoy the true emptiness, which in these texts is called wondrous existence. This is very interesting. So let go of the notion that the emptiness talked about here is a loss or a void. It's actually the flowering of one's true wondrous existence. We mistake this illusory existence as being truly substantial, as being something we can hold on to. But if you can see through this illusory existence and break through your attachment to it, you will unite with the wonderful principle of fundamental true emptiness. So this is what the text is talking about. Yet, the number of people that come to listen or pay attention to this, as the Buddha said when he was in the woods, he says, he picks up a pile of leaves and he says, how many leaves are here? They say, oh, a handful. And he said, but how many leaves are in the whole forest? Oh my gosh, lots and lots and lots. The number of people that draw near and understand this are like the leaves in my hands, and the number that don't are the leaves on the ground. In any event, here we are, not because of me, here we are in front of this wonderful text saying, whoopee, go for it, okay? Get the fundamental true emptiness, the prize. What did you do on Friday night? I went to the Buddhist monastery. What'd you get? I got fundamental true emptiness. Wow. Is that like Black Friday sale? No, this is a real thing. So Buddhism really I don't want to use Buddhism, the Dharma is all about untangling and freeing up the mind, untying the knots that obstruct this natural purity and stillness, this liberation and joy. When I first came into the monastery, the abbot gave this expression, and I've kept it all this time: return the light, illumine within, and seek the fullness of your true self. Return the light, illumine within. Don't go chasing outside after everything. Look within your own essential nature, and then seek the fullness of your true self. This is probably the hardest thing to appreciate. The reason I appreciate it somewhat when I first came in is because I had spent almost, I would say, misspent so much energy of my first 25 to 29 years just seeking, running outside after everything, every high, every wonder, everything that promised to fulfill the illusion, the dream. And every one of them just kept falling away, falling away, falling away. Not because I wanted them to, I didn't want them to, but they just sort of revealed themselves as false and empty. So sometimes you come in because your good roots are so strong, even at an early age, you're just inclined towards the spiritual. Some of us have to hit our heads around a bit, to get the sense of, hey, that's not what it's cracked up to be. It's fairly highly overrated. But there's something in the unenlightened condition, which is basically where these texts start with: ordinary living beings are the subject who can become Buddhas, but in their state of ordinary living beingness, what drives and holds them there is wanting, seeking, getting, and then an anxiety that comes from a false sense of lack. So living beings, it says, by very nature are grasping everywhere. We are constantly shopping, buying, getting, acquiring. And this activity, the text says, covers over the wondrous. Instead of letting go and having that disentangled openness, we shut it down by grasping, attaching to material things, and even in our sleep and our dreams. And so one of the things about the text says, this constant desire of grasping and craving actually isn't the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is the anxiety that's driving it. And the anxiety driving it is a sense of lack, of insufficient. I'm not whole and complete. I'm missing something. And once you spook in that way, the text says you're going tumbling, endlessly seeking things that never really bring you satisfaction, and even when you get them. So the one I was thinking about, somebody described the new technique for the ads this time. I talk about this because when I was growing up, there was no Black Friday. There was no Cyber Monday. Is it Cyber? What is it called?
Yeah, it's
Cyber Monday, which is also Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Black Friday is Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So this goes on. But one person was saying the new technique now is hurry up, get it while it lasts. Almost gone. And so it's like, whoa, so this, somehow the advertising people figured out you can't just lure them in as like, this is really cool, it'll make you really lovely, people will draw near to you, why not, you deserve it, blah, blah, blah. No, it's the fear thing. Get it while it lasts, because the fear of missing out. This is this lack phenomena that really hits at us. And we're suckers for this. Because we feel we lack and we don't get what we need, then the sense of, well, if I don't get it now, I'm going to be missing out. So this is a Jin Chuan term, I didn't even know this expression, called FOMO. FOMO? What?
Fear of missing out.
Okay, fear of missing out. I'm missing out on dreams, illusions, bubbles, and shadows. Wow, can't get enough of them. I told you when I was a kid, I was the last one to take a bath in the house because I had 3 sisters and we only had one hot water heater and it was always pretty much cold. So I entertained myself by stealing their bubble bath, and I would throw it in and then make bubbles. And some of them were really cool, and I'd try to get them, pop, pop. Now, if I'd been enlightened at the time, or if it had been really good roots, I would have gone, all conditioned things are impermanent. I shall attain the way. But I didn't. I just kept chasing bubbles. Even when I got out of the bathtub, even till I was 29 years old, I was chasing bubbles. Bubbles come in many forms, folks. So when I was thinking about this, what came to mind is this wonderful parable in the Lotus Sutra. Have any of you read the Lotus Sutra? You know the Lotus Sutra, the wonderful Dharma Lotus Sutra? It has some beautiful parables in there. The parable of the prodigal son, parable of the burning house. But the one I thought about tonight that I was going to share with you is the parable of the jewel in the robe. And basically it goes like this. There's an impoverished or poor man who goes to visit a close, wealthy friend. In being treated to wine, he becomes drunk and sleepy and then falls asleep. The wealthy friend has to go out on business, but before leaving, he sews a priceless jewel in the lining of his sleeping friend's robe. When the poor man awakens, he has no idea that he's been given the jewel. And so he sets out on a journey, and to provide himself with food and clothing, he searches with all his energy, encountering all kinds of hardship. He has to beg, he has to work for a pittance, he's always hand to mouth, not even paycheck to paycheck. That's a luxury he doesn't even enjoy. He's always in want. He has to be content with whatever he can get, and some days he doesn't eat at all, or he doesn't have a place to sleep. Later, he happens to meet his old friend who is shocked at his poverty and shows him the jewel in the robe that he had sewed in. The man realizes for the first time that he possesses a priceless jewel and is overjoyed. So, of course, what do we make of this parable? What is this talking about? At one level, this is a teaching the Buddha is giving to his arhat disciples at the time, so they too have this treasure within, but they don't fully realize it. They can become Buddhas, but they stop short of that goal. But now he's encouraging them, yes, you have it. You actually have the Bodhi potential. On another level, you could say all beings have the Buddha nature, have the jewel within, and only because of this confused thinking and this fear of lack and grasping are they unaware and undeveloped. So I kind of share that parable with you tonight because it counters the sense of lack. When I was brought up in the religious tradition I was brought up in, this was bedrock. Bedrock was I was lacking, I was insufficient. I was born into a state of depravity, moral depravity, sinfulness. And I could not escape that. All I could do is hope to ameliorate it somewhat by being a good person, by, doing all these good religious things. But for the rest, all of my life. And that teaching also included children, even newborn babies were in this state of depravity, moral depravity. So, interestingly, some philosophers have said that at least in the Western culture generally that's had a strong influence of this particular type of religious tradition has given rise to material capital market economies that are constantly driven by not need, but fear of insufficiency, of lack. And because there's lack, then we go out and constantly acquire and want more and more. So it's good for the economy, but it's hell on the soul or the psyche. But this unrequited, anxious state of not being whole and complete, feeling I don't measure up, leads to trying to prove it by acquiring. So one of the philosophers that looked into this actually said many of the early people that acquired wealth, like the robber barons, did it not because they wanted to enjoy themselves or have pleasure domes, but they did it to show that they were blessed and could be seen in the eyes of God as gifted and destined for heaven. And so, and you could see this because when they acquired it, they lived these parsimonious, frugal lives. I mean, really embarrassing. They had massive amounts of wealth at the time, and yet their personal lives, they wear the same socks for 2 weeks. They would shower once a week, the same set of clothes. They would use their handkerchief over and over and over again. They would walk if they could ride. If they could ride, they'd take, poor transport. Why did they do this? It wasn't to enjoy wealth. It was to use wealth to stave off the sense of lack, insecurity, and not being saved. So people have pointed out that was true then, but I would suggest that it's still true that most of our consumption is driven by this fear of lack, and we feel as if we can get it, we can acquire it, somehow we will stave off our own immortality, our own decline. Problem is, it doesn't work. There's a wonderful line from the text that says, the mind of greed is like a bottomless pit. The more you put in, the more empty it is. You can never fill it. Maybe that's why we constantly turn over our possessions. So we go out on Black Friday or Cyber Monday, and whoopee, we get all this stuff, and then we have a yard sale on Tuesday, and pass the old stuff on others who come by and think, oh gosh, this is a bargain, and they get it. So we're just schlepping stuff around back and forth. My garbage is your, jewel. My jewel soon tarnishes and becomes garbage. And we go around and we think this is growth and progress. The GDP, is just going through the roof, right? The stock market is happy. And yet, systemically, we're one of the unhappiest societies in the world. And there's no direct relationship with more wealth beyond a certain point. Don't get me wrong and say poverty is happiness. It's not. But there's a certain point after which, and this has been done in studies, after which the accumulation is inversely proportional to happiness. So it doesn't add more after a certain point. What's that certain point? Enough. Sustainability. So we are kind of, in a sense, when I say these are not religious teachings, I mean that literally. They're social psychological teachings. A lot of what's ailing us right now psychologically is this fear of lack and insufficiency that's driven by, and I would say probably the planet as well. If you look at what's happening environmentally, it's literally on fire with overconsumption. Just share with you a recent interview I heard, and I got the book. I'm going to look at it, but it's called something about how does the book go? It's The War Underground, I think is the title of it. And basically, there's a scientist who is looking at these precious metals and minerals like copper, all the imiums, what are they? Copper, lithium, all the special metals that are used, the rare earth metals that are required to drive our cell phones, our computers, and increasingly our electric cars. So on one hand, we think that we're solving the problem of our overconsumption by driving electric cars and using, but in fact, the amount of energy required for these computers, not to mention Bitcoin, okay, come on guys, how much energy, water is whatnot involved in using those things. We think we have technical solutions for problems that are psychological, but they're going on and doing that. And he's saying the pollution that's caused by going after these minerals, the wars that are started for people fighting over these minerals, the labor exploitation that's taking place in the mines and the children in the mines that are mining these minerals. And he said, when you weigh that, okay, you have gas cars releasing, that's bad. But he said, if you quantitatively look at this, it's not better. And so the solution isn't to keep the dream going of more and more is better. It's to ask, when is enough? When is enough? I know this is really not popular. Really not popular. I'm not going to get a Nobel Prize in economics for that. When is enough? But, there's a great What do these guys know? The ancient sages, Zhizhu Changla. Knowing enough, always happy. What? No, getting more, always happy. No, knowing enough, always happy. Zhizhu, knowing sufficiency. Or you could say sustainability is happiness. Dirty word on Wall Street. Any event, I'm suggesting that these texts are talking not only about spiritual states of mind and heart, but they're really talking about the whole world that is constructed by this mind. And when the text says all these phenomena are made from this mind, that's what it's talking about. So, anyhow, we're out of time tonight. The next section is all about karma. So this is really, so we've gone from emptiness, dharma, emptiness, self. Now we're going into karma. Fascinating topic. But we don't have time tonight, so I'm going to share a poem with you tonight because I like it. And it gets, remember the Lotus Sutra parable, the jewel sewn within, that we have it, but he had it and didn't know it, and he just bumbled along. This is one of my favorite poems from W.S. Merwin. Merwin was a contemporary, he passed away recently, a contemporary poet, very interesting life that he led. One thing he did was, with his wife, to buy up this totally derelict piece of property in Hawaii that nobody wanted because it was just literally burnt over. Nothing would grow there. And they turned it in 15 to 20 years in this absolute paradise. So just living there day by day, nurturing things, bringing in plants and whatnot. There's a documentary video on this if you want to watch it. But here's the poem that I liked. And I'll read it twice because, I should have projection and PowerPoint, and I don't do that, and I apologize. On the other hand, if you just close your eyes and listen, really? Yeah, close your eyes and listen. The Guanyan's method is return the hearing to listen to the essential nature. I'm saying return the seeing to see your essential nature. Okay, here's the poem. Going too fast for myself, I missed more than I think I can remember. Almost everything it seems sometimes, and yet there are chances that come back. Chances that I did not notice when they stood where I could have reached out and touched them. This morning, the black Belgian shepherd dog, still young, looking up and saying, "Are you ready this time?" I'll go through that again. The reason I like this last closing is because my dog in Maine, in the morning, will be at my door wagging its tail, basically saying, "Let's go. Put your books down. Let's go. Are you ready this time?" Here it goes again. This is beautiful. Going too fast for myself. Going too fast for myself. I missed more than I think I can remember. Almost everything, it seems. Sometimes it seems like I missed everything. My whole life has just passed, and I've not really realized anything. And yet there are chances that come back. And this is what I mentioned by a moment in nature, a retreat, something like that. Chances that come back that I did not notice when they stood where I could have reached out and touched them. This very much reminds you of Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. The chances are there. I could have reached out and touched them. There's a retreat coming up, and I could have, I'll do it next year. I could have reached out and touched them, and I didn't. This morning, the black Belgian shepherd dog, still young, looking up and saying, "Are you ready this time?" So you could take this last line as when things come up that move you towards that nature, move you back to the spiritual, sort of here, am I ready this time? Or am I going to, sempre mañana, postpone it. There's a wonderful expression my teacher would use. He says, you can postpone everything, but death will not postpone for you. Anyhow, we'll close there tonight. Next week will be our last class, right? So next week's our last class on Friday the 13th. Whatever, this is just nothing. And we'll go into this section on karma. This is a very rich section, really important section, and a good place. And then we'll pick it up again at the beginning of next semester. When do we start next semester, Ken? Early February. Will I be ready this time? Okay, we'll do the transference in English. Those who don't know it, I think there are cards with the words on them in the back. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the triple jewel.